Hello everyone. On behalf of the Victorian team at the Institute of Architects, I'd like to offer you a warm welcome to today's Lean-In, the Sustainable Architecture Awards Masterclass 2025, which will showcase 4 of the projects recognised in the 2024 AIA Victoria Sustainable Architecture category. My name is Stephanie Bullock and I'm from Cosloff Architecture and sit on the Institute's Victorian Chapter Council, as well as co-chairing the Sustainable Architecture Committee, and it's my honour to be your host and moderator for today's Lean-In session. We're joining from across the country today and we acknowledge with deep respect the traditional owners of this land. We acknowledge that it is a privilege to stand on country and walk in the footsteps of those before us, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. This Lean-In session is being recorded, so if you miss anything today or have to leave early, we'll be publishing this recording on the Institute's YouTube channel in the next couple of days, and we'll share that link with you in our upcoming email communications. The session also enables you to ask questions of our panellists, so if you have a question or comment, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen to add yours in, and we'll go through these at the end of the session. Our first presenter today is Bonnie Herring, who is the Strategic Design Lead at the City of Melbourne and also a member of the AIA Victorian Chapter Council. Bonnie is an architect and sustainability advocate with over 15 years of experience embedding ecological and social values into architectural practice. At Breathe Architecture, she contributed to award-winning projects focused on sustainable and community-driven design, and more recently, her role at the City of Melbourne City Design Studio has deepened her expertise in civic design and collaborative urban strategies, with an ongoing focus on improving practice processes, design coordination, and delivery across diverse typologies. Before we hear from our other presenters, who I will introduce shortly, Bonnie is going to provide a brief overview of the National Architecture Awards Sustainability Checklist. Thank you, Bonnie.
Hello, everyone. And thanks, Stephanie and the Institute for inviting me to join the conversation today. I'll keep it really brief so we can get to the fun stuff and the more beautiful slides. So suddenly it's 2025 and today is my daughter's first day of primary school. It's a milestone, and being around all that buzzing potential at drop-off this morning, it's really made me wonder how I can best support her as she grows up and meets the future that's heading her way. 2030 is just around the corner, and it's another big milestone on the decarbonisation pathway to net zero 2050. Now, and within these next 5 years, we're tasked with delivering new builds and renovations that are all of electric, of course, that are highly efficient, ready to be powered by a renewable grid. And we're also going to be really busy calculating and drastically reducing our upfront carbon by at least 40%. So what we've heard time and again, and what's made really clear in the latest industry decarbonisation pathway document, really great, you should have a read if you haven't already, is that Australian emissions reductions are really falling quite short. And so bold action beyond the speed and scale of regulation is key to meeting these science-based targets, building capacity and inspiring the broader built environment to catch up. Each of these exquisite projects you're about to hear about are really inspiring. They're multi-typology demonstrations of this future-focused design. So the National Architecture Award Sustainability Checklist is a program members have been familiar with since 2023, when it was implemented to align and lockstep with the 2030 milestone. Most of the questions are pretty common sense. Has the implementation of passive thermal design principles, made the building's operational energy reduce? And others are more technical or use developing design processes like whole-of-life carbon assessments, or, if you've established your practice sustainability action plan. But what this group of architects will likely tell you is that their wins weren't really due to any kind of point shopping or epic certification process, but about vision. The checklist is a prompt to share design decisions along the duration of your project, and it's used to assess baseline eligibility and provide the jury with background for the sustainability criteria that's relevant to all categories. It allows entrants to provide an evidence base across those key design considerations that demonstrate leadership and make it worthy of receiving a sustainability award. It's structured in these 6 sections, covering ecological impacts, siting considerations, energy consumption, resource consumption, social issues, and also how your practice is operating. Questions Listed in each sections, you mark them with a yes, no, or a not applicable, and there's an extra field at the bottom of each section for technical detail and supporting info. All categories except heritage and small project need a pass result of 2 out of these 6 sections. And you can elect for your project to enter the Sustainability Award by ticking the box. The checklist aims to be, offer impactful design opportunities that we should all be considering, and even use it as a tool to help promote and validate design processes right at the beginning of each project. The demand of architects is to hold really all that we know about the impact of buildings on global emissions and to reconcile this with each of our projects. It's obviously not just for awards, but to use our area of influence to bring about a cooler future. Leaderships for these projects, is not without those realities, of course, but it's despite them. I encourage you all to work through this checklist and in the practice of these projects or as your project develops, and hopefully we'll see the outcome in the awards next year. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that fantastic introduction, Bonnie. Our first presenter today after Bonnie is Michael McLeod, who's been a core part of the Kennedy Nolan team since 2009 and was appointed Director of Architecture in 2017. He has a strong interest in the social responsibilities of architects and a continued involvement in teaching. His experience covers a wide array of projects and typologies, from single houses to public precincts. Michael is presenting the Wilam Ngarrang Retrofit by Kennedy Nolan with Finding Infinity, which was awarded a commendation in this category last year. Thanks, Michael. Happy for you to now share your screen.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks for the invitation to speak today and for organising all this. These are not easy things to put together, and thanks everyone for attending and showing interest. On this project, we worked with Finding Infinity, Ross Harding and his team, and we've been fortunate to do that a lot recently. They approach in sustainability with incredible enthusiasm and openness, and we're doing our best to continue that spirit. And I think this event is an example of that kind of openness. None of us are going to solve this problem on our own, but if we share the information and work together, we can have a much bigger impact. Our project is in Fitzroy. It's built on the lands of the Wurundjeri people who speak the Woiwurrung language. We acknowledge them as the traditional owners of this place. And we were fortunate to have a client who also understood that true acknowledgement is required. They undertook their own engagement with the Wurundjeri Land Council, agreeing on an approach of language, visibility and financial commitment. So there was a mural by Wurundjeri artist Alex Kerr here. There was the buildings named Wilam Ngarrang, meaning a place of reflection or thought in Woiwurrung language. And there was a commitment to paying the rent with a percentage of ongoing revenue going to First Nations organisations, and 2 apartments are socially rented. None of these measures are huge in themselves, but hopefully they demonstrate that a small speculative private development can contribute to cumulative impact while being respectful of the time of elders. Some context. So the aim of this project was to create a financially replicable model of low environmental impact retrofit, reducing the operating costs for inhabitants. And then it was a prototype to look at how this could be rolled out across Melbourne. Starting point. So this is a Fitzroy building, 6, they're known as 6 packs. This one's 3 stories, 15 identical bed sets. You've probably seen this one or something very like it somewhere near you. It was transforming this building to create an example for others to follow. It was to be replicable. It was to be fast. So no town planning was involved, or we couldn't be a long town planning process. So it was a fixed smart application. It had good bones, but it was in poor condition and leading to uncomfortable living conditions. So plan. generally falling apart, poorly used spaces around the building, unused car parking predominantly. Key targets, so all the team getting together, COVID time, masks on, net positive energy, minimising water demands, zero waste operations, minimal carbon in construction, and approaching zero waste construction. A big part of this project was designing the team and designing the process. It didn't follow conventional methods. The team was non-hierarchical. Finding Infinity was on board first. There was a sort of invited competition between architects to join the team. We came on board, the builder was on board at the start, and the developer, Triple, was on board at the start. And we all worked together to make it happen. The aim was for as little design as possible. It wasn't heroic architecture. So emphasis on reusing existing fabric, retaining as much as possible. We had to be strategic. Everything we wanted to do, we had to make a case to that team, that non-hierarchical team. And we had to put our egos aside when things didn't make it in. All of our things didn't make it in, but a lot did. So some of the early presentation sketches. This is where we ended up. So the plan was adjusted. The car park was replaced with a garden, bike parking, communal laundry, shared facilities. On ground floor, the spaces around the building were turned into open space for the use of the residents. And on the upper levels, which is the same plan, the apartments, like we didn't have the money to move things around, but the amenity was improved as much as possible. Importantly, there was an emphasis on creating domestic comfort. I mean, the technical performance of this was improved, but also just the appearance and the way that you live in it was considered from the start. Making places that were warm, welcoming. They're also very small, so they had to work hard. So that was it before. That was what it was changed to. Images, some photographs. When space is tight, sometimes you sort of end up with this sort of tiny house approach, but this was about making sort of big, generous moves, just not very many of them. We would have loved to have added balconies. That didn't make it into the cost. So the windows were replaced. They're big sliding windows that sort of act as a balcony. We had to accept imperfection, like tiles, fittings. They were all seconds or things that were sort of destined to go in a bin. So we didn't have a lot to choose from, but we kind of realized that that's not that important and can be quite freeing sometimes. To sort of choose the least ugly option. And it was about housing a community in this building. So turning the undercroft and the spaces around into something that would support the 15 dwellings, because they have very little internal space. So reusing materials on site. There's a lot of mechanical services, heat pumps, all of that was replaced and all of that had to be accommodated in this area. Finding salvage materials. There was a big communal marble table that was made from marble scraps taken from contractors. And there's opportunity for planting. These are very early photos, but already the garden's starting to take off in that area. And communal laundry, you can see some of the giant heat pumps in the background here too. And then part of our job was harnessing this to get it out there. One project like this isn't going to make an enormous difference. It was like, how can we get the information to others to do the same. So there's a lot of information that's sort of freely available and shared on this one, and we sort of did our best to get it out in as many publication and forums and awards programs as possible, because that's where they're really, really useful. These are some slides that Finding Infinity did. At the presentation, the awards presentation that we did was me and Rachel and Ross Harding from Finding Infinity. For 8 minutes, we all got, 3 minutes or less each. And yeah, we flew through this, but they did the numbers. They were sort of looking at the bigger picture, how much is being wasted on inefficient buildings, how many homes there are. If we could fix, what the impact we could have on these 15 homes is minuscule, but if this is rolled out, it starts to have big impact. And they, fortunately, they did all this sort of research beforehand. They prioritized the shopping list of what needed to be done, that costed all of these things, and then we just worked through and got, there was like a triage, which ones we could get in first, and then we worked our way down. All the costs we tried to keep it very transparent and public to see where money was going and how, because it's no good if we did this once off with a bunch of people working for free and no one else could do it. So it was to make it as replicable as possible. They've been tracking the costs. The reduction in bills is intended to, over time, offset the sort of increased costs of the rent due to the upgrade. You can look through all this in more detail, I'm sure, if you're interested, all the embodied carbon, and then tracking the performance. It's all well and good to have these intentions, but to look how it was going. I think we were sitting at something like 82% of running energy was being provided by the building itself, and they're looking at tuning that to improve it. And then they've had a series of events getting the word out there. Again, that's what's most important. So getting people through this, getting developers through this, getting other organisations that own housing of this era, because the more other people doing this, the better. It's a small project for our office. It was a limited service, but it's had we've been pleased with the impact. It's been picked up by the Government Architect of New South Wales. It's one of their case study projects. You can see there on the right, and it won the Powerhouse Hallmark Innovation Award in the Sydney Design Week as well. So getting it out there, and all of that is about just sort of rolling it back in and trying to get more of these happening. And then just to finish on this about the Sustainable Architecture Award, I guess some comments we would have is like having clarity on why you want this award. I mean, we would say this is one of the most important awards. You're not doing it to put it in the pool room. You're doing it to get the project out there and to get maybe more of those type of projects happening, so that can give real clarity. Why this specific project might deserve an award. Every project's hard. Every project is amazing if you get it to the finish line. So I don't know, you've got to focus on the things that the jury can see beyond that, and might, what is the one sentence that covers that? Consider it from their perspective. They sit there on a very, very, very long day looking at, so many 8-minute presentations. How can you make their job more straightforward? And that leads into the next one of being very concise. 8 minutes is incredibly short time. How can you use that effectively? You really just want a visit. You're provoking enough curiosity to get a visit from the jury. Everything makes more sense in the flesh, and you've got more time in the flesh. And that the work that goes into this presentation is worthwhile. You can use it in other places. Huge congratulations to Public Realm Lab as well for Powerhouse Place. Clean sweep of the awards, such an amazing project. We all win when there's projects that good out there. Thank you, and thanks to all the other winners.
Thank you so much, Michael. Our next presenter is Lloyd McCarthy, Associate Principal at KTA. Lloyd is an architect with over 20 years of experience, specialising in master planning and sustainable design. Since joining KTA in 2016, he has led award-winning projects, including the Broadmeadows Town Hall redevelopment and the Queen and Collins Design Competition, as well as the Bundanon Art Museum and Bridge project. Lloyd is presenting Preston South Primary School, which was also awarded a commendation in this category last year. Thank you, Lloyd. Happy for you now to share your screen.
Thanks, Stephanie. And thanks to Michael. Yeah, not an enormous project, but important and beautiful project. So congrats to the Kennedy Nolan team. And some great tips there at the end too. So hi everyone, thanks for joining. Presenting Preston South Primary School here. On behalf of KTA, I acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on which I sit and the land on which the project sits, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present and recognise the ongoing connection, knowledges, rights of First Nations people and hold a responsibility to advocate for justice, equity and healing at our core. Modern day, our site sits on Hotham Street in Preston, south of Bell Street, just down from Bell City, which is the former Panch Hospital. The site has been public school since 1878 and is understood to be the longest continuously used state-run education facility in Victoria. The school has sadly experienced two significant fire events, which destroyed much of the built fabric. The first in 1968 and then later in 2009. A four-room brick building constructed in 1878 remains the oldest education structure in Preston. The entry to the school is off Hotham Street to the west, characterised by four significant 120-year-old English elm trees planted by students as part of the once popular Arbor Day. The school is located immediately adjacent to the T.A. Cochrane Reserve and a council-run tennis club. As with most inner-city Melbourne primary government schools, the site is small for the number of students that it caters for and is nestled in amongst fine-grained residential neighbours. I'm going to present in sort of three themes for this project: civic contribution, sustainability, and the teaching and learning model. So civic contribution, an idea that buildings, particularly public buildings and school buildings, should survive and contribute to society above the minimum design life. So KTA consider all education projects as important pieces of social and civic infrastructure. They're not simply about didactic instruction from teacher to student. They carry with them the aspirations of a community and become platforms for discourse on education, of course, but also sustainability and climate change, community resilience, and the well-being of future leaders. They're an opportunity for community to show pride in the milestones that their children achieve through years-long education and social journeys. Our school buildings are part of a network of civically responsible projects drawing on the history of particularly red brick school buildings of years gone by. The site, as KTA found it, was characterised by a loose, leaky and awkward arrangement of structures set around the only remaining school building to have survived both fires and a suite of relocatable buildings. Through the master plan, it became apparent that the requisite floor area to serve the student population would need to be housed in multi-storey facilities so as to preserve the valuable outdoor learning and active and passive recreation spaces. Site planning established a strategy to selectively edit out the 6 most awkward buildings from the site and replace them with a new consolidated footprint 3-level building. This resulted in the completion of the street edge and established a civic school presence on the street. The design of the new 3-storey brick building pays homage to the immediate context of the campus, the neighbouring terrace houses. The red brick party walls of these houses informed the east and west facades. The distinctive red brick piers pick up the vertical rhythm in combination with infill metal perforated screens. Their depth with the fins creates shading for the east and west facades. Adjacent to the street and alongside the elm trees, the piers form an entry loggia, creating a warm and welcoming arrival experience. and providing a scaffold for community activities here as the backdrop for a student-produced film, Aniko's Sapna, and at other times used for mini fetes and art stalls. So the sustainable goals for people and planet. So early discussions between KTA, the VSBA and Preston South Primary School resulted in the decision to design the new building to Passive House standards to best reflect the ethics of the school community. This endeavour wasn't merely about creating a new building then, it was a testament to the school's commitment to fostering positive change. The school's education philosophy, embedded in actively teaching the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, laid the foundation for this journey. So rooted in the pillars of Passive House, the framework for Preston South Primary encompassed life cycle energy analysis, building fabric analysis, material selections, long-term maintenance considerations, and strategies for building resilience. The result was not just a building, but a holistic approach that mirrored the school's dedication to students, community, and the environment. Passive House standards led us to design and deliver a building which is thermally broken from outside to inside, provided improved and constant fresh air plus heating and cooling via heat recovery ventilators, is heavily insulated and well sealed. The natural assets of the site, the established landscape and distant views were leveraged through visual links enabled by thoughtful planning and window arrangements. And then to mitigate the east and west orientation, the brick fins and insulation build-up generated a deep wall, providing shading and opportunities to inhabit with built-in window seats. And how this links to the school's teaching and learning model, an idea of being socially sustainable and inclusive. So as a vertical building, it maximised space for various education needs on a tight site, incorporating specialist, so science, in this case, space and administration, reception and staff areas on the ground floor, while upper levels are a mixture of collaborative, informal and outdoor learning, of offering a variety of options for different teaching and learning practices. The indoor environment prioritised long-term health and well-being, emphasising connections between indoor and outdoor spaces, ample natural light, outside air provision, and the use of natural materials with low embodied energy and low VOCs. Spaces are purposeful and varied, allowing inclusivity for students with varying education, sensory, and emotional needs. Spaces were developed to work hard to perform more than one function, e.g. stairs with large landings that could be used for small group work, like practicing a presentation, or used as a gallery for student art. Outdoor learning spaces further the options for differentiated teaching and learning, allowing messy activities and to benefit from being upstairs and outside, benefits of natural light and air. Full height fall protection via stainless steel mesh allows unencumbered views. Built-in timber bench seats and soffit linings contribute to softening the spaces, while the reading of these outdoor spaces and the strategic editing out of screening elements signals active teaching and learning to the community through an engaging facade. So the successes of this project as relevant to the Institute Awards, I think were largely due to that alignment between client and architect regarding the sustainability goals. And that was evidenced really, particularly on the jury tour, where we worked really closely with the school principal, Leon, and he gave a spiel to the jury, which we think really hit home and sort of evidenced that strong link between the school's education approach and our architecture. The ability to see out of the building, the immediate and distant landscapes for all interior spaces has been really positively commented on, and the perforated screens have worked really well to reduce direct solar gain and glare while still allowing views out. Some lessons: the building was not Passive House certified. During design development, it was discovered that the appropriate VRV plant for the size and occupancy of this building had not been tested to achieve Passive House standard, and to use plant which had been tested would have meant an increased plant area, additional capital cost, and inefficient units. So it was collectively agreed between the school, the department and ourselves to not pursue certification, but hold on to the principles and deliver those. And the lesson is that lightweight framed roofs are really difficult to seal up with airtight membrane. The builders and subbies did really well. We achieved 1.0 air changes per hour. The passive house max is 0.6, so we would have missed that from a certification point of view anyway, but noting that the average Australian building hits about 15.4 air changes per hour, being really leaky. For a more sealed building, concrete roof deck would have worked better. And so where does that leave us? Having been through all this, we're still learning about passive house. We're wondering about the appropriateness of it for Australian education buildings, considering that it was originally created for houses in Europe, where the use and occupancy profile and heat loads in schools differ markedly from houses. There is more embodied carbon in a passive house education building, being a commercial building, while obviously operational carbon is reduced. But with a shift of considering whole of life carbon, not just operational, we wonder if passive house strikes the right balance. We're yet to see any metrics on the building performance, but anecdotally, the school have advised that the internal spaces have remained comfortable and the air quality is noticeably better than other buildings throughout the year. And I would love to hear any feedback from anyone on the session today if they have tidbits or thoughts on those queries. So I'd like to thank the KTA team involved in this project for their contribution. Thanks to the client and the consultant team. Thanks to the Institute and the jury for the recognition and the opportunity to present today. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. Our next presenter is David Leggett, who is the practice leader of LLDS and a qualified architect in Victoria and the UK. His built projects have been widely published internationally, most notably the Bristol Harbourside Master Plan, Singapore Management University, the International Digital Laboratory for the University of Warwick, and the Master Film Store for the British Film Institute. His interests lie in the materialisation and delivery of projects with innovative technical solutions that reinforce the clarity of a design concept to ensure the delivery of a client's vision and aspiration. Just a reminder, everybody can mute themselves if they're not speaking as well. David is presenting Northcote House, which received an award in this category last year. Thank you, David. Happy for you to now share your screen.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, so this is a little bit of a smaller scale compared to the last two presentations. So Northcote House was shortlisted for the residential new, the interior architecture, as well as the sustainability category. The slideshow was more or less exactly the same for all three presentations. Our prepared words were only slightly different, probably more different in the interior architecture presentation as we spent more time speaking about finishes. The sustainable aspects of this project were mentioned in all three presentations. As you can see, they're integral to how the house was designed. Now, I'll just go through the slides as they were presented, and where relevant, I'll stop and sort of give some further hindsight to some of the key sustainable aspects of the project, but some aspects like orientation, insulation, thermal mass, I'll just leave that to what we had prepared in the script. So the house is located in Northcote, 4 kilometres north of the CPD. It sits at the rear of the shop unit where the land was used as a tandem car park. The area is well served by public transport, but it's only accessible via a laneway. Surrounding the site are large gathering-like hall spaces, churches, theatres, and large former factory lofts, all of which inspired the volume of the house. Located 3 kilometres further north is the workshop of Power to Make. This is the manufacturing side of our business, and it's co-located with the design studio. Here we operate robotics and CNC machinery for architectural research, and in this instance, to make building components for the house. The vast majority of components for the house were fabricated or sourced locally. So I've already made two key sustainable points. Firstly, we're using a brownfield site, sacrificing an underused car parking space. And second, the fabrication of the architectural components for the build were manufactured locally using advanced digital technology, and more on that later. So the design responds to the narrow site condition. It's 4.6 meters wide, 22 meters long. The concept is to elevate the ground, so we create a roof garden. The house looks to reconceptualize the terrace typology to bring light deep into the interior. We speculate how the same typology can be used as an infill to similar underutilized sites in the area to create sort of green fingers that can support a growing population in our city. So the two more points. First, we're increasing the local ecology by turning the car park into a green roof, but we're also speculating how this approach can infill similar urban sites. The entire house is 82 square meters. We start on the first floor of the house as you enter from the laneway and up the staircase to the large kitchen and dining hall. The north boundary wall blocks the warm prevailing wind, and the existing build form provides a path for the cooler southeast wind to cross-ventilate the house. The timber stair descends down into the snug. The snug, with a wood heater, is in the center of the house. We used the circle as a primary spatial device to create the snug and the two bedrooms, with the in-between spaces are the antechambers and vestibules, which contain wardrobes, bathrooms, and utility spaces. The rear of the house is a courtyard with a rainwater tank and herb garden, and a spiral staircase that takes you up to the rooftop terrace. The terrace is 9 square meters with recycled timber deck and a provision for solar panels to the north. The rest is a brown roof for ease of maintenance. Planting on the roof is irrigated by the rainwater tank, and the added benefit that runoff from the irrigation then returns to the tank. The section shows 2-meter level difference across the site. The cantilevered eaves at the front provide shade to the veranda. The east bedroom has a vaulted concrete soffit to take the uplift loads of the roof, and the internal wall is a highly textured concrete wall that provides thermal mass and disperses sound to reduce the flutter effect due to the parallel boundary walls. In the early stages of the project, we experimented with the concrete texture using a router tool bit to create the pleated texture to increase the surface area of the wall. The pattern is cut on high U-value PIR foam board, which was then upcycled as insulation for the roof. We managed to convince our concreter to allow us to insert the PIR board between a Perry system formwork on site. We chose to use the modular reusable Perry system to eliminate construction waste and to deal with the very tight site, as it also provides its own scaffolding. Despite high embodied energy, concrete has sustainable advantages over timber frame construction. The longevity of the structure outlasts timber frame, and with many of the architectural components designed for disassembly, the future shell of this building can be repurposed. So here we mention for the first time disassembly because we were in control of how components were put together. We realized we could detail using mechanical fixings to allow them to be disassembled. So in the future, if this house no longer becomes fit for purpose, the vast majority of the components can be unbolted and removed, allowing for a complete refurbishment. This photo shows the large hall halfway through the build. It shows the day joint of the concrete pour in order for us to make sure the pattern is continuous for the final pour. We scanned the entire site and then readjusted the pattern to account for creep and tolerance on site so that we can create a highly crafted surface to reduce the design waste. So here we demonstrated using technology This time, scanning the site after a concrete pour allowed us to then adjust our 3D models and fabrication files for the following packages. So like the roof beams and staircases, the beams had to span from wall to wall, but we noticed that the concrete pour wasn't perfect. By scanning it, we could make those adjustments. So when the beams did come to site, they just slotted in perfectly. Thermal mass has allowed us to not have any air conditioning installed. So the internal temperatures have remained around 10 to 15 degrees lower than outside temperatures during the peak of summer, as we've also utilized nighttime cooling. The house is detailed to achieve high air tightness. A recent test proved that the air tightness of 2.2 cubic meters per hour at 50 pascals. So anything below 3 is considered excellent, together with a heat exchanger for the interior air quality is filtered and extremely fresh all year round. I think this is by far one of the most sustainable benefits of using concrete as the exposed internal finishes is more control over the internal temperatures, the internal environment, especially when you couple this up with a heat exchanger. The roof is made from cross-laminated plywood panels in collaboration with TGA engineers. The asymmetrical roof shape responds to overlooking from neighboring windows and maximizes daylight to the interior. The deep roof structure is designed to block out the harsh summer sun and diffuse winter light when the sun is at the highest point. Power to Make fabricates the roof structure within the 4 kilometers of the site. Part of our design strategy is to tap into the local manufacturing capacity of the area. The stair geometry is bounded by the circle of the lower floor and the elliptical opening of the upper floor. It consists of 237 layers of CNC milled FSC certified plywood. Threaded rods are used to clamp the entire structure together, in effect post-compressing the layers to minimize the use of glue, so the structure is designed for disassembly. The east and west facades are designed as giant trellis for planting to grow over the elevations, also designed for disassembly. So finally, just take you through a quick tour of the building. So starting at the laneway, the half-sunken elevation with stair leading to the veranda with the deep eaves to protect solar gain from the mid-morning sun. The hall-like dining room with the plywood laminated roof. The materials were chosen for their natural finishes, and we've avoided using painted finishes anywhere in this house. The compact kitchen and dining island where the ceiling lowers to create an intimate space. All appliances are electric. There's no gas in the house. The solid surface door fronts have been surface milled to respond to the pleats in the concrete. The holes left over from the concrete ties are used as flexible pegboards for joinery, and when not in use, are covered by brass discs. A view looking back at the east elevation, borrowing the greenery of the neighboring facade. The black column is actually the flue from the wood burner in the snug. By rising up through the void, it's able to heat up both floors. For veranda space here, you can also see the brass inlay to the concrete day joint. 13 roof lights bring diffused daylight into the interior. Each one of them is lined with brass and installed using augmented reality. A view down to the snug with the giant cushioned floor. The tops of the stairs are lined with brass, which will tarnish and scratch over time. The layering of the stairs, the brass conduit conceals air duct for the heat exchanger. The geometry of the stair indents where the wall lights are positioned. A view looking up from the snug to the roof beams and skylights. The east bedroom with the faulted concrete soffit takes the load of the roof above. You can see the pattern aligned thanks to the digital feedback process of using point cloud scanning. There's a circular window to the northeastern corner of the room to pick up the morning sun. It's a mouth-blown piece by artist Ruth Allen. The glass distorts the light entering into the room to give a soft glow, which the ensuite benefits from this glow. A view of the rear courtyard and the west bedroom showing the range shelves and the outdoor shower below the circular stairs. The west elevation showing the trellis-like facade for planting. In coming years, the facade will be covered with greenery to shade the summer sun. And I just finish off with a view of the urban brown roof. This photo was taken like over a year ago. The sedum that's planted there has now sort of overgrown, and you can hardly see any of the brown scoria there. And that's where we concluded. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Our final presenter is Anna Maskiel, who is a registered architect and co-founder of Footscray-based architectural consultancy Public Realm Lab, which exists to enrich public life. Anna was the leader of Powerhouse Place, the revitalisation of the powerhouse on the Mighty Murray in Mildura, which she will be presenting today. As well as being awarded the Alan and Beth Caldecott Named Award for Sustainable Architecture, Powerhouse Place was also awarded the Regional Prize, the Joseph Reed Award for Urban Design, and the Victorian Architectural Medal in 2024. Thank you, Anna. Happy for you to now share your screen.
Thanks, Steph. Hi, everyone, and what a group of presentations to follow. So we thought that this project had a shot in the sustainability category, largely because it's the first public hemp masonry buildings to be constructed in Australia. And so we were pretty dismayed when we didn't even get shortlisted when the first shortlisting was released. But the night before the presentation to juries, we received a call inviting us to present sustainability. So we had no time to adjust our presentation. This is the same presentation that was given in all of the categories. And I have to say I saw a number of presentations, including David's, on that day, and was completely terrified by the lack of specificity of my presentation, and I guess the kind of absence of data. In hindsight, I guess that's possibly fine, because this project is far less about a kind of technological triumph, and much more about a kind of very holistic triple bottom line approach. So I'll also do my 8-minute presentation as it was, and then make some comments at the end. So we call this the People's Powerhouse because at its core, this is a story really about resisting a kind of singular institutionalized tourist icon and instead trying to create the most varied settings for the broadest range of uses and users for the least resources. That's important to us as a practice because we exist to enrich public life. Our project takes place on the Mighty Murray River on the country of the first people of the Milu Valley, the Latchi Latchi people, and it's 7 hours from Melbourne. This distance is physical, and we responded very much by looking at local materials and suppliers, but it's also psychological. Mildura really has a sense of standing alone, and the community were clear that Melbourne architecture, whatever that may be, would be rejected in this place. Our brief was to activate the riverfront. You can see the mighty Dungala there, which is crawling with cyclists and walkers in the cool morning, but that really lacks any amenity to keep people as the day heats up. Mildura is a desert climate, essentially, and so it gets very hot very quickly. The CBD is a very short walk away, but is located on an escarpment up above our site. So there's a full level change from our site up to the city.
Anna, I think your slides aren't moving forward. Do you just want to check?
Oh, sorry, you're right. How do I? Sorry.
Just reshare. That's all right. All
Good
good.
thing I didn't present this via Zoom last year. Is that better?
That's much better. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just quickly show you the things that I had thought I had shown you. So the urban context and the historical context. The powerhouse, which you can see here in this historical image, was part of a broader settler industrial complex that irreparably altered the river wetlands and brought electrification to Mildura. The traditional owners referred to this site though as culturally sterile. And I think as we did community engagement, the community have both a deep pride in the technological innovation that this building and this precinct represents and what that meant for Australia's first irrigation colony, irrigation settlement, as well as a real desire to centre Indigenous culture in this place. And I'll talk more about that as we go on. So we inherited a master plan, which is the image on the left there, which set out the future development for the entire riverfront with our precinct, which is that extract, to be the key social and commercial spaces. But straight away on appointment, it was clear that the community no longer supported the master plan. It was perceived to represent overdevelopment. And despite the stimulus funding being allocated specifically for tourism, there was a strong push to see benefit for locals, local arts groups, social enterprises and businesses. This meant that we had to build substantially less, but still activate the river 24/7. We had to have smaller, far more flexible spaces that could be offered at lower cost to local businesses, rather than the kind of institutionalized massive anchor tenancies that the master plan had anticipated. But we also had to hand council something that wasn't going to be a financial burden to operate. So the financial viability of the precinct was critical on an ongoing basis. We were supposed to be ripping on with design, but our project had an identity crisis. So we really broadened our net with support from our brave client to consider who this place could serve, what they could do here. And our client endorsed ultimately a kind of dispersed, disaggregated, lo-fi community programmed approach. So we went from this kind of singular, spectacular object, which I think almost always necessitates a degree of institutionalization, to far more kind of shifting territories for tribes. The people own the powerhouse, the people primarily program the powerhouse, and people come now to visit and see other people at the powerhouse. The brief became essentially the most for the least in this particular place, something distinctly Mildura and Riverside. And our design response to kind of try to meet this really hinged on three key kind of shifts. The powerhouse has a scale, a presence, and unsurprisingly, the thermal performance of an industrial building. An early move was to reinstate the ghost of the boiler house building, the building indicated here in orange, which is the powerhouse's companion that was dismantled a long time ago. So based on historical images, we were able to kind of reinstate that form to create deep shade and a covered outdoor performance space. And together, these two vast roofs gave us an opportunity to turn this previously extracted historical complex into a restorative one, where on-site solar soaks up the Milduran sun, which is a nice kind of 21st century role for a powerhouse. Around these two kind of mammoth structures, we slung three almost kind of follies. Here in orange, the toilet building, and then these two other buildings here. And these are the first Class 9B public hemp masonry buildings in Australia. So biophilic and nitrogen fixing and carbon sequestering, super insulated. We'd been researching hemp construction as a practice for many years, and we could see in this project the chance to do something that was great for the particular project, for the climate. We could see that it was a great kind of story for council, that they could pitch that there was this locally grown building, because at the time we had a local hemp supplier. But also really importantly, we thought it could contribute to political change and the mainstreaming of hemp masonry construction, because the local member was chairing the Industrial Hemp Task Force for Victoria. There's some snaps of the hemp, which was ultimately rendered in this project. This shift from industrial objects to kind of more diverse sensory experiences is achieved through varying expressions of mass, skeleton and skin. So we have a collection of kind of rusted leathery skins, luminous skins and sheer skins. And both externally and internally, on an incredibly lean budget, we've prioritised textures and materials that nod to the industrial past, but with a tactility and density that reward the senses. The next big idea is a shift from a kind of spatial formality to informality. With the boiler house footprint reinstated, we were fast approaching the formality of the village green that the original master plan had anticipated. From our earliest conversations with traditional owners, but also more broadly, that Eurocentric terminology was shaken off. The space is now Lenaganjanji, and we worked to make the project much more informal, fluid, and intimate. We used essentially the least built form possible to provide the gentlest sense of containment, to demarcate place, leaning very much on landscape and the shifting ground to create zones. This is both political and pragmatic. So the precinct has to work in the round with no real front or kind of primary arrival point, and it will have to continue to adjust to community demand and surrounding development for a long period of time. And just to go off script briefly, I think this project, as we dug more and more and more into consultation, and as we challenged the notion of a kind of tourism-led precinct, was very much about supporting marginalised communities. So this idea of kind of a very low threshold to entry, kind of no wrong door approach to the site, and that spatial informality became really important. Internally, there's also a kind of flexibility and a fluidity to program and see across the whole powerhouse or across each of its discrete spaces. The last kind of idea, I guess, is really about how the precinct works above grade, at grade, and also below grade from the river. So from the escarpment, as you approach from the city, you read a kind of roofscape essentially. Whereas when you're down at the riverbank, you're actually looking up at the roofs of the building. So an early motif that we borrowed from the existing buildings, and that makes a lot of sense in this desert climate, with a language of kind of hats, these different hats, different materials, all performing different roles. So the boiler house, you can see, is kind of vast and scaly. It's clad in the rusted roof sheeting that was salvaged from the powerhouse building itself. The toilets have a kind of little skull cap, giving a sense of open sky and demarcating one of the entry points to the site. The cafe has a dramatic backlit sawtooth polycarb selected for its relatively low embodied energy in a few applications here. And this is really our way of making this tiny building hold a much greater territory, cast a lot of shade, but also act as a beacon to tourists and locals alike. This kind of backlit roof is visible as you cross the border from New South Wales on the other side of the river. And the idea was that it was a way to kind of say, something is happening here, come and see. A view at night or at dusk. And what is happening here, we think, is a community seeing itself and seeing each other and continually renewing its sense of self through those encounters in this place, rather than consuming a kind of static presentation of who they are. Happily, in the first 12 months after opening, council exceeded their targets for utilisation by 200%. And 50% of both the curators of events as well as audiences were from marginalised communities. At the opening ceremony, the mayor declared that Mildura finally had its Fed Square. So with apologies to Don and Lab, for us, that is proof that it is the people's powerhouse. So that was my formal presentation to juries. I might stop sharing. And I'll stop speaking too, Steph, because we've hit one.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much, Anna. And also thank you to our other presenters for those incredible presentations, and also for your generosity and openness. It's just so helpful and a great piece of advocacy. We're almost out of time, but I might just press on that generosity slightly more. I thought we might just go through each of the presenters and ask if you could just give one piece of advice, whether in relation to the award submission, the jury presentation, or the jury visits, based on your experience. So might go in order to put you on the spot, Michael. What would be your one piece of advice in relation to the process? If everybody could turn on their screen, their video as well.
Sure, Steph. I think because the idea of competing for sustainability sometimes feels sort of counterintuitive, but we've come around to it in that it's a way to pull focus on things that are important. So we think we've come right around and think that this is incredibly important. So we'd say like each, I don't know, I think our focus has been what can be learned or repeated from a project. No, none of us are working at a scale that, you know, is going to change the world on its own. We're talking shaving off a few tons of carbon here and there or whatever, but all of these projects, you know, have things that could happen en masse, and that's what we'd be pushing in any awards program.
Fabulous. Thank you, Michael. Lloyd, what would be your advice?
I think obviously you have to get to the tour, but I found that probably the most engaging part of the whole thing, and sort of, you know, the idea of you talking to your peers and relating to them about the work that you've done and making that real human connection. And as I said in the pres, sort of bringing our client Leon, who's larger than life. He's a real character, and, you know, sort of was on board with us and really helped us to frame the whole thing. So I guess, yeah, be real on the tour and engaging, and have people along with you that you know were there for the journey too.
Wonderful. Thank you. David, your thoughts?
Yeah, I need to agree with Lloyd there as well. I mean, when you start off with the presentation, it can be very daunting. You're in front of a jury that's like really studying exactly what you're saying, and there's a whole crowd of people as well. So it's important to be prepared and to just make sure you get all your key points across. But yeah, once you've got the jury visit secured, you know, you can then relax. You can let the building do the talking rather than you having to sort of explain everything again. And then, you know, the building is the winner after all. Thanks.
Fantastic. And finally, Anna, love to hear from you.
Yeah, I can kind of echo all of that, and particularly in our instance, I guess, having not prepared a presentation that was tailored, being on site and an opportunity to talk about, you know, these are all the salvage materials. These are the separate grants we got from Sustainability Vic to embed these things in the precinct. These are the hemp buildings. This is the extent of the car parking that was used on site previously, which is now landscaped, was useful. And also, I think, yeah, the client, we have an incredible client who I think she did most of the talking. She captured people's hearts and minds.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining. And just a reminder that these lean-ins are recorded to view later, and you can receive notifications as to when new lean-ins are available to view by subscribing to the Australian Institute of Architects YouTube channel, YouTube @Oz Architects. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful day.